Why do fully grown adults shuffle decks of cards and expect the results to answer questions on their love lives or career choices? Why do witches and clairvoyants scry for the future in tea leaves and crystal balls? Why do astrologists look to the movements of the stars and heavenly bodies for guidance on the cycles of their lives? Why do some people claim they can sense what is not perceptible to their physical senses? Why do some people get excited when they see certain numbers cropping up in their day? Those who are logically minded will say that there is no logical reason for otherwise sensible and reasonable people to behave in these ways. In truth, existence is entirely logical, and there is nothing, therefore, wrong with being logically minded, with putting one's faith in logic. It's only that one's knowledge of what actually does count as logical often does not match one's own enthusiasm for logic. Or in other words, just because you see the value in being logical doesn't necessarily mean that you're particularly good at it, and this can be true of even the most highly regarded experts in logic. The reason that tarot cards and other such oracles can, on occasion, be effective is because there is no such thing as a random number. There is no such thing as randomness. It simply does not exist at all. There is only that which cannot be predicted by a calculator, by a basic equation. Understand, whichever lottery ball comes out next, that specific ball came out for its own specific set of reasons that caused it to come out. There is nothing in the slightest that is random about the flip of a coin, or the cutting of a deck of cards, or the shape of a cloud. We apply the word random to those things that we find we are unable to reliably predict. But we should not take our inability to predict a thing to mean that it does not have deterministic reasons causing it to behave as it does. Every number you ever see turned out to be that specific number at that specific time in that specific location for its own specific reasons, in relation to everything else that is going on in existence. The very reason that you flipped a head or a tail is because all the rest of existence agreed that it should and could only be so. The next printed number you see, there is not one speck of true randomness involved in you seeing it. And this applies not just to the number itself, but to its typeface, the size of the typeface, the colour of it, the surface it is printed on, and so on. All of these things must be in agreement with all the rest of existence. They have no choice otherwise. They cannot disagree with any of it. They cannot contradict anything that is also happening, anything at all. So, does this mean that we can reliably flip a coin or draw a tarot card for perfect guidance on any given question or situation? The answer to this, unsurprisingly, is no. But here is where I'd like to talk about a thing called heuristics. Heuristics are basically general rules of thumb that we use for making quick decisions when we simply do not have the time, resources, or pure information to analyze a situation and make a definitive judgment. For example, a surfer who is trying to both remain balanced on their surfboard and control its direction does not have a fully detailed set of information on that specific wave at that specific moment relative to their specific location, position, and momentum. It's conceivable that if they did have access to all of that information, along with a computer running a program designed to analyze that information and tell them what their next perfect move would be in order to produce the outcome they are looking for, then they could take a look at that information, provided they had some suitable waterproof device there with them on the surfboard. But our technology hasn't quite reached that level yet, as far as I'm aware, and so the surfer relies on heuristics. I know from experience that if I'm in danger of falling to the right, it generally helps if I shift my center of gravity to the left. The more experienced a surfer becomes, the more their own personal set of surfing heuristics increases. Their heuristics in this situation don't only apply to the behavior of different kinds of waves in general, but also to the specific board they ride and to their own specific body. Heuristics, by their very nature, cannot be infallible replacements for knowing exactly what is going on in exhaustive detail. They are simply invaluable to the point of essential aids for us in navigating a life in which we never know exactly what is going on in exhaustive detail. They help us walk. They help us talk. They help us make the vast majority of our decisions. Using oracles such as coin tosses and tarot cards for guidance is, just like learning to surf, only a case of building one's own set of using oracles for guidance heuristics. As I say, we never ever know exactly what is going on in exhaustive detail. But as I also say, there is nothing that is random anywhere at all. And just as learning to surf takes time and practice, and is a thing that many people who try it soon give up on because their progress with it does not increase at a quick enough pace for their own liking, so too is using oracles for guidance with increasingly reliable results, a thing that takes time and experience. And just like surfing, it takes self-awareness. A self-awareness that increases over time, just as one's own personal set of heuristics increases. It can only be a process of trial and error, one that the individual must decide for themselves is worth the effort to them to continue with or not. There is nothing random in all existence, nothing at all. But the operating resolution of existence is one of infinite differentiation, so hardly any outcome can ever be predicted with absolute certainty. But all of existence is very much connected to all the rest of existence. All of existence, despite its infinite complexity, is entirely in agreement with and directly related to all the rest of itself. The heuristics we develop for ourselves to enable us to walk with increasing confidence are relatively simple compared to the heuristics we use to talk and make ourselves understood with increasing confidence. The more complex an activity, the more complex and subtle the heuristics that help us to reliably carry out that activity. And when we are dealing with an existence that plays out at an infinite resolution of complexity, there can be no limit to the heuristics we may potentially develop for ourselves. In other words, no matter how far we go in our own personal development, there is always further that we can go. There is never an end to the heuristics one may potentially develop for oneself. There simply is not. It is only ever a question of what feels worth the effort to us personally. That is all. Just as learning to talk, learning to communicate with other people using your own voice is a matter of developing your own heuristics to do so, so is learning to communicate effectively with your higher self a matter of developing your own heuristics for that task. Other people may share with you the heuristics that they employ themselves, and this can undoubtedly be of help. But even when this is the case, you must still make those heuristics your own before they can work for you. Our spiritual teachers, self-help professionals, religions, etc., they can have a tendency to view their own heuristics as definitively correct formulae. They can frequently persuade themselves that they are definitively correct, that what works for them must work for everybody else. And very tempting it can be to them to sell their own heuristics as the answer to anyone willing to buy them. Here is the secret that everybody else has been missing out on, and if you are willing to buy into it, you may have as much success as I am telling you I have had. As I say, the tips, tricks, and wisdom of experience of others can be helpful, no doubt. But your relationship with your own higher self is entirely unique to you. Your relationship with the world and existence itself is entirely unique to you. What works for an octopus is not necessarily what will work for a squid. What works for a basketball player is not necessarily going to work for a dancer. What works for this gardener is not necessarily going to work for that gardener. I myself employ all manner of heuristics for communicating with my higher self. Sometimes I do cut a deck of cards or flip a coin to see what thoroughly non-random results may present themselves. And then I have to go ahead and use even more of my own heuristics in order to help me interpret these non-random results for myself as best I may. I'm not afraid of trial and error. I'm not afraid of getting things wrong. I do not need for myself a perfect and absolute guarantee of success before I try a thing. If I did require that, I would never try anything at all. And in this way, I would deprive myself of many lovely experiences. And I'm quite fond of having lovely experiences. I'm really very fond of it indeed. So perhaps the core message I'm looking to convey in this video is: there is nothing in all your life that is ever the slightest bit random, and yet there is ever so little that we can ever be absolutely certain of. So develop your own heuristics for life with that in mind, and pay honest attention to the results. When your old heuristics aren't quite working for you, try something new. This in itself is a heuristic. Don't worry about perfectionism. Just look for progress. This, in itself, is a heuristic. I encourage you to be playful and have fun, because even if it doesn't bring you the perfect answer you are hoping for, at least it is playful and fun.